Views expressed by CamaPlan podcast guests may not reflect those of CamaPlan. CamaPlan does not guarantee the accuracy of information provided by guests, nor does it endorse or recommend any individual or organization. CamaPlan is not an investment advisor, CPA, realtor, or attorney. You are encouraged to conduct your own due diligence before making investment choices. For any tax, legal, accounting, investment, or other questions, please consult a specialist. Welcome back to the Road to Financial Freedom, where experts share stories and secrets to unlocking financial independence. This podcast is brought to you today by CamaPlan, a self-directed IRA administrator focused on educating investors on how to grow retirement savings faster through alternative investments. I'm Ricky Trong, CamaPlan team member and podcast host. In each episode, we're going to take an in-depth look at the many roads taken to financial freedom and how they differ for each of our guests. Today's guest is very passionate about technology and climate change. He is a co-founder of 6C Index, a company that allows investors to profit while helping to solve the climate crisis. Now, to learn more about his journey directly from the source, I'm going to welcome Demian Klenk. Hey, Demian, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it, Ricky.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here today. I think your topic is really interesting. It's not something that we've really talked about yet on the road to financial freedom. So I definitely want to introduce our audience to, how they can really get involved in climate change and do it through investing, which I think is very unique. So why don't you give us a little bit about your background, where you started, and how you became a co-founder of 6C Index and what you do with that company?
Thank you. I love the chance to tell you these things. Yeah, I've always been a big proponent of technology and an optimist. I never believed in a no-win scenario. I always thought that if we applied the forces that existed, then we could always kind of solve certain issues. And I was inspired by crypto. About 6, 7 years ago, a friend of mine showed me the voting prototypes on Ethereum, and I saw, wow, this is it. This is like how we democratize voting, and have a true democracy, and all these kind of incredible new types of justice could come. But there were a lot of barriers for that to actually working still, which is, trusting your phone or systems where you have biometric systems where you could read it. So it was always kind of like still a bit science fiction. So I was always kind of looking for the low-hanging fruit, the real way to apply this technology. I was inspired by the carbon markets. I worked as a Bitcoin analyst and trader. And then just a few years ago, the first kind of products that represent carbon that could just be used as an investment came out. Basically derivatives for carbon itself. So to understand this, I'm going to have to give you guys a little kind of explanation of what the carbon markets are and their history. So the idea is that 20 years ago they had an international meeting to try to figure out how to lower carbon emissions. And so they made certain standards between each country. So if you have a certain sector that you work in, the governments will tell you what your emission standards are. And if you come under those, you're awarded credits. And if you go over those, you have to buy the credits or you have to pay fines. And the credits represent removal or reduction of 1 ton of carbon dioxide put into the atmosphere. So it created a new instrument, a new commodity that you could trade. And the trading it's been 20 years and the market is a lot bigger than most people think, but there's still no one clearing price or set price like there is for gold or oil in the world. So all of the countries, and even within the countries themselves, they set their own standards. There's no benchmarks. And so the price of reducing or moving carbon varies widely around the world. And everyone who is involved with this has been looking for a way to get a set price and to scale. And so once you start to get into it, it's one of the most interesting, exciting kind of investment prospects there are, because what that really means is I'm sure everyone's familiar with the climate crisis, right? And scientists tell us that if we keep pouring carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, we'll move the temperature up 1.5, and then all these kind of irreparable damage will be happening, and it's an existential threat to us. So the amazing thing about it, applying a market force, is that we know how much it would cost to remove the carbon. Right now, there are like 10 machines on Earth, and for them, it costs about $300 to remove the carbon. We would need 20,000 of those machines to remove the 40 billion that we're putting into the atmosphere. There's projects that fertilize part of the ocean. It creates an algae, and then it dies, and it pulls down the carbon. We know that we'd have to fertilize the size of Australia for it to remove the 40 billion. Also, we know that trees, even with their natural cycle of taking carbon and dying, they remove. So if we planted 1 trillion trees, we'd also solve the carbon crisis. But that would require every available land on Earth being planted. So these are all enormous undertakings, right? And we know what the cost of it, which is about 9 trillion. So, that's almost 20% of the world's GDP, depending. 10 to 20%. So it's such a massive amount of money that we would actually have to change the reverse base, switch from what we hold as a value set. So it's incredibly exciting and interesting and complex, but none of it is science fiction. Like I said, that's why I always love the ideas of how you apply it. By using blockchain technologies, we can solve a lot of the transparency issues by making how we monitor and calculate the carbon much more accurate so that we can award the credits better. And also we can use different kind of new monetary systems that came out of crypto that help us to turn that into a reserve, basically, without having to worry about all of these countries in the world getting together and making decisions, which they should and they are, but it's too slow. We need to create all kinds of different interesting products now, and that's where we came in. So we have one where what we do is we buy up all the different carbon allowances or removal credits. And instead of how it normally works is probably you're familiar with the idea of net zero, right?
Why don't you go explain it a little bit for those of us that don't understand what net zero is considered?
So what it is people and companies and countries use calculators to try to calculate how much carbon they're putting into the atmosphere. Okay. And it's still controversial because it's really hard to calculate supply chains and all this, but you can get these general ideas. And then you buy the credits and you what's called retire them. You buy them and you remove their ability to ever be sold, and they represent an equal amount of carbon removed or reduced to your footprint, right? And that's how the carbon markets work outside of government mandates, meaning that you as a person or a company, you can say, hey, I want to be neutral. Even though the government's not forcing me to, I can buy these credits off my calculation. And generally it works out to about 1% of your gross revenue to go equals to about to make you neutral, to counter your carbon activity. It's not working at all as a model because it's 1%. And it's punitive. It's a cost put against your books, and so people aren't forced to do it. And in the end, we're just putting more carbon in the atmosphere. So what we're doing is we buy up all of the different allowances and credits, and we remove their ability to be put towards one specific emission or ever be used to go to one person's net zero. And that way, they keep their collateral value. They don't get spent. They appreciate in time. They go up. They become an investment asset. And the idea is that instead of 1% as a cost, you can go 2 or higher percent as an investment. And we change it from a cost system to an investment thesis. And the idea is that once you build up enough volume of these, the carbons become the bonds of the future. And there's all kinds of different institutes and governments and trying to work out what the best way of going about this is. Because if we really want to solve the problem that the scientists tell us we have to, and that all the big governments have pledged to, then we really do have to remove that amount of carbon and move that amount of money out of the system into that. So we need a lot of different products and ideas like this to do that. And to do it as an unmandated pledge is just not going to work.
Interesting.
Does that make any sense? Or
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely understand that. So I just have a question. I mean, this is going back a little bit, but you said that there's these machines that take the carbon out of the atmosphere, correct?
yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just thinking, back to science class when I was younger. So, like, usually machines, I don't know how they're run, if they're electric or coal or whatever they're run by, but would they be emitting emissions as well? Would it be any kind of, anything that would be similar to the amount that they're reducing from the atmosphere?
No, they reduce, so they use a lot of, if we were going to build 20,000 machines and pull 50 tons of carbon out of the atmosphere, we would actually we would go negative. We would pull 50 tons, but we would
Mm,
use 30% of the world's energy to do it.
mm,
So
interesting.
they create a net negative amount of carbon. You have to burn fuels. There's all different. They work off all kinds of fuels. Like I said, there's only a few of these machines right now, and they
Sure.
haven't. It used to cost $600 per ton to pull it out, and they pull it out, and they can either make products with it, or they can send it into the fuel, into the ground, and and put it into the rocks permanently. But now the price is going down and down and down, and the average price of carbon in the world is anywhere from $10 to $40. The average price of removing it with one of these machines is like 200. And it's not just these machines; it's all other kinds of projects. Like I said, no one would ever just put it all on these machines or on one type of project. It's like they say there's no silver bullet; it's a silver shotgun. You need
Gotcha.
all of these different kinds of projects at once, right? That's why we're an index. That's why we believe in staying robust and allowing a place for all of these, the diversified package of investing in these all at once, right? That's the thing. It would take 30% of the world's energy, but at the same time, you'd be cleaning the planet. There's always new types of energy being invented. So nobody really knows exactly how it'll all go down. But on paper, it's feasible. You could use these machines, and 20,000 of them, the way they are now, would clean the atmosphere. We just have to sacrifice 30% of the world's energy to do it, but it would be 100% clean energy, and it wouldn't matter where you put them. It's like a fish filter. It just sucks it out of the atmosphere. So
Hmm.
you could have one, in Texas that's cleaning the air in China.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. So I know we had spoken a little bit before, but I know that you have like an ethical self-interest. So what does that mean to someone that maybe isn't really interested in, the crisis or doesn't understand the crisis that's going on?
Well, I mean, that goes back to the road to financial freedom. How do you define freedom, right? So, freedom is to ensure your family, your friends, your life, from financial contingencies. But it's also the freedom to invest in things that are ethically, viable to you and to everyone else. And also, like, things that are risky, that are interesting to you as well. That's part of freedom. So, it depends on how much you believe in contemporary science to believe whether it's ethical or not, or what your own personal. Otherwise, it can be very localized. So there's all different ways to invest ethically. You know, a lot of it's generally you look at your life and what's affected you. Health wise, community wise, and you can always research. There's the beautiful thing of the world is that there's always some engineer or some company or someone trying to do some niche solution to something that's interested in your life. For me, the carbon markets are really ambitious and wild, and we're taking on. And I do believe in contemporary science, and I believe that this is the Earth producing an enemy to pull us all together, which is pollution. One that we created, and this is an opportunity to change the discourse and apply our technologies and start to look at ourselves as a global community. So for me, it's on the big scale. It's
Okay.
but. For ethical self-interest investing, you can just look at your neighborhood or something that's affected you in your life. And then you can always find some company or person. But you always have to remember, with financial, it's always about a percentage of to risk. The more undeveloped the project is, the higher risk it is, the smaller percentage of your portfolio you should put into these kind of things. This is just education, not advice. But
Oh,
still,
yeah.
there's a beautiful kind of blueprint for what we should be doing right. Most investing people comes with a big grain of guilt because you invest in, like one of the major indices or industries that isn't necessarily good for the planet or your children or whatever, but it's the easiest and safest way to invest or move your money. Or money itself has a lot of, negative connotations to where it came from and the way that we measure it. So it's a difficult kind of calculus to know what's ethical and not. So, but there are kind of some simple blueprints in life to find.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and of course, it's ethical is different to every person, as you said. And thank you for, touching on the fact that it can be a risky investment, especially when it's a newer project or there's not as much known about it as, maybe things that have been around for a long time, which I feel like, at least in the past 100 years that I've known, like we've been trying to fix the crisis with, the carbon, because I mean, the Industrial Revolution is really what amped that up. I feel like that it's changed so much. So I know that like, for me personally, like I plant trees in certain places around the world, like on Arbor Day and things like that, because you want to do something. But this is amazing that you have this opportunity on a larger scale than just, planting one tree. There's so many opportunities within this index that you can do. So what are your goals with C6 index? Are you looking for people to invest into it? Are you just looking for more connections into becoming net zero? Tell me a little bit about the company itself and what your goals are entirely, you and your co-owner.
Yeah, we're still fairly early stages of this. So yeah, we're still looking for initial partners and investors. We have some really interesting ones already, and on the carbon side and the tech side and the marketing side. But like I said, we're still kind of coming out of stealth mode and finishing our first round of investment. So we're definitely looking for people that want to take, that have an appetite for something ground floor. And then we're looking for anyone who can kind of lean into our message, which is moving carbon from a liability to an asset, changing the way that we think about it. Because in the end, we're not reinventing anything new. The technology more or less exists for all of this. It's just about changing the narrative, thinking about the way that what we invest in, it's changing the idea of investing from consumer-based goods to regenerative commodities. So yeah, reach out to us on through our website. Follow us on our Twitter, LinkedIn. We're a crypto project, so we're really active in Telegram. We have our own podcast every Wednesday on Twitter Space that we just started. So we're looking for people that have, want to invest, have questions, interesting projects that want to be on the index itself. We are going to, we're a momentum-based weighted index, like the NASDAQ or, the S&P. So the idea is that if you looked at the S&P in the 80s, none of the same companies are on it. Right? That's the kind of magic of indexing. So you get to invest in the whole industry itself, and over time you change it or reweight it based off of different criteria. Indexes are weighted different. Ours will be weighted off of momentum, how long the project has been vetted to the amount of volume that it's moving on, and then we'll give it stronger weightings. That way, because it's such an early nascent market, it gives us a chance to bring on a lot of interesting projects. But the ones that have already proven themselves will have the greatest weighting. But the ones that show up and do something interesting, inspire people, will grow and change the most. So we're looking for that. We're looking for anyone who has any kind of project that they think could be turned into a carbon credit. We have a couple partners that specialize in that, in onboarding different onboarding mechanisms to turn, whether you own a farm or you have a company and you're going to make major changes, you can earn credits, secondary revenue models from that. In the idea, it's about changing the reward to good behavior. And none of this is science fiction. The registries exist, the exchanges exist, the market is, almost $1 trillion market already. Companies like Tesla wouldn't have it. They would be insolvent without carbon credits, because it's too expensive to make their cars. So they get awarded these credits, which they sell to GM and whatever. So the market already exists. And right now it's at a kind of for transitioning those kind of companies and technologies, which is great. And for people to kind of like a percentage of people to offset their behavior. That's all great, but it's actually not working. We're still putting more carbon in the atmosphere because we haven't turned it into a boom economy. We got to change the mentality to the way, the dot-com boom or the real estate boom or the crypto boom. We got to get everyone really excited about, hey, and this has the potential of being the greatest boom of all because it goes back to the ethical self-interest. There's not as much guilt on this. This is about, hey, we could get rich and clean up the planet. So and if the model works, it can be applied to all kinds of things. There's companies and projects out there building biodiversity tokens and anti-plastic tokens and different types of regenerative. Are you familiar with NFTs and how tokenomics work at all?
For me, I know what NFTs are, but I don't, understand the very minimum. Like, I just know a very minimal amount of it. So if you want to talk about that, please feel
Yeah,
free.
well, the simplest idea is this, right? So Bitcoin came and it was the ability to just use a computer program to monitor a kind of unique value of moving a value from one to another, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then NFTs came and we were able to create a unique digital value from tradable art or specific digital aesthetic assets. So it gives us the ability to tokenize, to create a unique value from an alternative object or subject. So what's the next progression in that? It would be tokenizing human activities, right? So why would we stop with just tokenizing art when we can tokenize, and carbon is the obvious one because it's not a normally you have oil or you have an object that people will buy and sell and consume. Carbon is about the activity of cleaning the atmosphere. So if we have the ability of creating new revenue value systems, and that's what NFTs have done, and that's what crypto has done, what's the next thing? And that's what regenerative finance is. And that's the next big movement. You guys, that's like in the fringe right now, all the ideas behind it. It starts to get a little complicated in explaining it because DeFi systems, the idea is that instead of having centralized financial institutes that hold all your money and give you interest and set up the systems for how you have money to make money, refi systems have everybody put a little piece and then the computer programs watch them and you still get these different kind of little revenue interest systems. And that's DeFi. And refi, regenerative one, is that we go to the next level. And like I said, we tokenize the actual actions to clean the planet, whether it's biodiversity or carbon, and we turn that into a value by having these, encrypted systems that don't need centralized control. It's a lot to wrap your head around, but it's exciting. If anyone wants to dig deep into it, regenerative finance is one of the most interesting inventions out there right now.
It sounds very, complicated, but at the same time, very interesting. I think you really have a hold on what you're doing and you're very passionate about how you speak in relation to these things. So that's why I really appreciate you being here today, because you really are passionate about what you do and you're putting that into this project, which, I mean, I don't know if you want to call it a passion project, but it definitely is something that you care about. And I think you're going to succeed in it because you do care about it. I know it's in the early stages and you're looking for investors and you're looking to match up with other similar like-minded companies and things like that. Do you do investments outside of carbon and like Bitcoin? Do you have other diversified investments that you like to invest in?
Oh yeah. For me, I mean, I've been an investor and trader for years. So I try to keep a diversified portfolio, but I've also been like very, to me, freedom isn't about just having endless money and not worrying. It's about the freedom to take risks and to do things that are in line with what I want to do in life. So yeah, I'm always looking for interesting new projects as well. And I try to I follow the market every day. I mean, everything's on sale right now. So it's a great time if you have liquidity, if you have cash to invest, and some time to wait, it's a great time. But like I said, if you find things that are aligned with what you changes you want to make in the world, then it goes way beyond just investing in finance.
Oh, yeah.
It becomes one of the self-fulfilling, meaningful adventures of your life. And money is just energy. That's the one thing when I started studying market theory, and I had a lot of friends that were economists for years, and I never got it. They were always like, it always seemed like, was like, well, this is so calculated and abstract. And it really, what it is it's about measuring human emotion at the moment. It's about greed or fear, and the analysis of that moment shows where history was down to the penny. There's no lying in finance, in a sense. So you can,
Yeah.
there's things that are misrepresented, but you can always go down to and calculate them. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating way to follow history in your life.
I'm just wondering, so you had been in this kind of industry for a long time before you started your own company. You had worked with Bitcoin. Is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started, that if you were to go back, 20 years ago and be like, hey, I went back in time and I need you to make sure to do this for this trajectory? Is there something like that you would do?
I try not to think like that, of course, but of
Okay.
course you think that way. Well, I mean, if you have the ability, if you had a time machine, then it's easy, and you can go back and you can long everything at the very beginning, any of the major cryptos or any tech stocks, back, history repeats itself though, so it's just about having the patience and time to do it. But no, like I said, right now I'm so focused in something that I think is super topical, so I feel like I'm at one of those moments right now with the carbon industry. Like I said, the average price of carbon out there, it went like the other kind of the comparable product, which is just an investment for carbon, it has beaten the market, has beaten everything. It's called Crane Share, so the IHS.
Hmm.
And in the last year and a half, it went from like less than $20 to 50. And then with the big correction in the market, it went down a bit. It's at 48, but it's still proving itself uncorrelated. And like I said, that price represents, if we get that price to $200 and above, that represents creating a boom that'll change everybody's mind about what we can invest in, you
Yeah.
know, and it'll start a revolution, and it's feasible. So it's not too hard to think of it getting that to that much. And as soon as it gets there, all of those projects I mentioned to you become profitable. Right now, they're subsidized. And they're heavily subsidized because of all the scientists and the governments, the pressure and the guilt and the this and the that. But it's pure, human psychology and investing it always repeats itself. We get these wild boom cycles, and it's based off of, and this one, like I said, has the potential to be the biggest because it comes with a little less guilt, which is super
Wow.
exciting. So,
Yeah.
I don't spend a lot of time looking in the past. Of course, I would have loved to go back in 2010 and buy a million Bitcoin and whatever
Who
it
wouldn't?
was, or buy Amazon stock or whatever. But I don't,
Yeah, right?
like I said, right now I feel like I'm at the cutting edge of something super interesting, and and just it's all consuming in a great way, and it's bringing so many kind of when you think of something. That's another thing about ethical investing and just ethical living. When you do things that you start to train yourself over time to think about others, that what's the value in helping people first, then it starts to open up so many doors in your life. You get so many more people that come on board that are interested, and it's just there is an amazing kind of power to altruism.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I have a different version of like helping others. Like, I used to work with special needs children, and that always gave me a great feeling of fulfillment because I wanted them to be happy, and it made me happy, just reciprocal from that. So I could totally understand. I mean, you're helping the world. So that's got to be a huge impact for you and, your team. Do you do any kind of like education or things like that involved with this, or at the stage right now, like when you're looking for
Well,
investors
yeah,
or?
you can come to our website, start with
Mhm.
our white papers. I have about 10 other different interviews and podcasts. We have
Mm,
some educational videos. We have all kinds of things. We have all kinds
mm,
of other references that you can go to. And like I said, As soon as people start scratching below the surface of this, they'll find that this is a whole new kind of interesting new field in the peripheral of investing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I wanted to bring you on here to begin with, because it's something that I wasn't, acclimated with. And, I wanted to make sure our audience knew about this type of investment, whether they do now for sure. Is there any last things that you'd like to share with us, an experience or something just to enlighten our guests and our audience to make them more proactive about working with the carbon emissions and, working to get net zero?
yeah, don't be afraid. The problem with a lot of, touching on this, it seems really hopeless in a lot of ways from the outset. It's a really scary thought that we can't do anything. And there's a lot of real pessimism as well, but it doesn't have to be like that, right? There is all kinds of amazing engineers and healers and economists and developers trying to solve the issue. It's a race. It's not a guarantee at all, but I just say get involved and stick to the things that look like they're going to work. And there is a lot of hope and optimism in this. And if your viewers get too burnt out, don't watch the news. Watch TED Talks and follow the people that are in the know that believe in the solutions, whether they're right or wrong. It just gives you so much more energy to follow that. And there's so many people trying. Even if the ship is hopelessly flooding, the people with the golden pails, just work with them, because it'll just give you a greater sense of there's a purpose to the civilization in general. So.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have said it better, honestly. If the analogy with the, pails getting off that sinking ship, you just want to do what's best for you. You don't want to have that sinking feeling. You want to be happy and proud of what you're doing. And that would make you feel, more accepting of other things that you could be interested in the long run. Well, Demian, I really appreciate you coming on this podcast today. I think it was very insightful, really looking, to see how your 60 index is going to grow from here. Really excited about all the endeavors you're working on. And, hopefully we can work together to save the planet. I just want to thank you again for being on this podcast, and thank you to our sponsor, CamaPlan. And of course, again, Demian Klenk, make sure to follow him on Instagram and Twitter at 6C_index. Or you can go right to the website at 6C-index.com. You can find all his information about his white papers and everything that they're looking to do with this investment and really make this index something special. If you don't remember those informational here, it'll all be in the show notes and the link below. And just in case you're interested in self-directed IRAs or finding out more about that, please go to CamaPlan.com, where you can request a consult with an expert, review our media library of webinars or podcasts, and you can open an account today. So thank you for listening, and remember to like, follow, and share our podcast, The Road to Financial Freedom, to continue with us on the journey and finding the path to success. Thank you again. Have a great day.